Hello, welcome back to the Instech podcast. Zoya here, and this week Robin is joined by Andy Yeoman, CEO of Concirrus, and a long-standing friend of both the podcast and the Instech community. Andy returns to the show at a moment of huge change, not just for Concirrus, but for specialty insurance more broadly. What started as a marine-focused business has evolved into something much bigger, and in this conversation, Andy unpacks what it really takes to rebuild a core platform, pivot a company, and do it all while customers are pulling you forward rather than slowing you down. They get into AI, not the hype, but the outcomes, and what bringing the joy back to underwriting actually means, and why MGAs might be shaping the next generation of risk entrepreneurs. Plus, Andy shares a surprisingly optimistic take on why this could be a golden age for insurance and technology. So pour yourself a coffee and enjoy the conversation.
Welcome to this week's Instech podcast. My guest today is an old friend of mine and of Instech, Andy Yeoman. He's the CEO of Concirrus. Andy, welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, nice to be back.
You are back because the last time we did a podcast with you was back in May 2023. And this is how I described Concirrus then. Founded in 2012, it has evolved to become one of the leaders in supporting marine underwriting through tracking ships and managing data. Well, that's only 2.5 years ago, but the business has changed a lot since then. Tell us about what you're up to now.
Yeah, it absolutely has changed. Well, so we get a 3-sentence, try and be concise. What's changed in 3 sentences? Firstly, we've moved from tracking ships and operating in the marine markets to having a full and core risk processing platform, which covers everything from ingestion through quote bind, aggregations, policy management, and invoicing. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've moved from marine to becoming a full multi-line solution across the specialty markets. And lastly, we've leveraged what has become really quite deep insurance domain expertise to help our customers implement game-changing software and deliver what I would describe as meaningful outcomes that have grown their business, improved loss ratios, and reduced expenses. So it's night and day from where we were.
I think we can call it a pivot, can't we? Is that a pivot?
I think it is a pivot or an entire U-turn, whichever you like to put it, but certainly an evolution.
So tell us about the reasons for that. What was the thinking?
It's a really good question. Yeah, this wasn't so much a thought as a necessity from our perspective. We'd been reasonably successful in marine, but this was just one line of business. And the challenges we were faced with in marine and how we were working with our marine customers, we saw were across many lines. So we really needed to do something. We noticed that one of the gating factors on our implementations was the lack of modernity in the core platforms that we were being asked to integrate with. And as we got more into that, we kept hearing about all the challenges that our customers were having with a lack of flexibility, etc. And in fairness, and I think you said this, Robin, most customers hadn't been shopping for core platforms for 10 years or more. So when we took a look into the market and saw lots of activity in certain areas such as submissions processing, what we saw was lots of point solutions, but they're only really dealing with one aspect, in that case, like document ingestion. And often their technology only extracted about 50% of the data needed. So that didn't sit well with us in marine. And not only did that not work for the customer in terms of not moving the needle, but actually it forced the customer to be the systems integrator. Our view on this was quite simple. If you've only got part of the solution, then you're really part of the problem. So we developed a view on what an end-to-end vision would look like in a contemporary platform and put that to some prospective customers. And candidly, we've kept winning business and they've loved what we've delivered. And the rest, as they say, is recent history in this case.
So when I hear a story like that, I think to myself, one minute you're doing marine data, you can draw up your fancy PowerPoint and say, this is our new strategy. But then you've got to build the tech, and that tech is end-to-end. So it starts with some kind of ingestion capability, and it's got workflow, and it's got the ability to add data and go straight through to the end. How on earth did you build that tech in what must be less than 18 months?
Yeah, to answer your question, we've evolved into this in much respect. As much as I like to think about, we had a big fancy PowerPoint and presentation, what we actually did was work with our customers who pulled us down a path. And It's different to how we might have been if we'd have gone and pitched to some Silicon Valley investor about how we're going to transform the global specialty market or whichever. We've gone from customer to customer, doing what made sense. You're absolutely right. It's a massive, massive leap in 18 months. And to be honest, it's been an absolute revelation. There's a lot of talk about AI in the insurance market, but as a technology vendor, what we've seen AI do for us internally has been nothing short of remarkable. 12, 18 months ago, we took the decision to become an AI first company. And what used to take us months now takes weeks. And the pace of delivery, still to this day, absolutely astounds me. It defies me how much productivity we get out of relatively few people. It's not been without its learning opportunities, I have to say, but we've got through these and we've emerged with a powerful set of technologies. I also have to give a huge gratitude to our customers who've been endlessly supportive and generous with their time and expertise. They bought into the same vision that we had, and we've been really lucky that they've worked so closely with us. So, not been easy, but the core technologies now are astonishing.
Are you able to tell us who some of those customers are who helped you on the journey? And obviously, as you alluded to, you're winning new business too.
If I measure customer count, we've trebled in the last 2 years. We've got clients across marine, aviation, political violence, terror, transportation, property, surety, and more. Yeah, so our clients here in London include companies such as Aegis, Beazley, Chubb, Score. We've got customers in Europe. We've got customers in the USA. We've got about half a dozen customers now in the USA. And they span brokers, MGAs, and some of the top 10 global carriers now using the solution. Some of the algorithmic follow markets are using our platforms in one aspect or another. A specific, if I talk about one of those, is a client in the USA, Applied Aviation, based out in Atlanta. So we engaged with them in 2024. They were doing about 40 million of GWP, a relatively recent startup. Fast forward a year, in 2025, they've grown that 40 million book to 140 million of GWP. They've had no proportionate increase in headcount and maintained a really strong loss ratio improvement. I think the thing that really surprised me about that client, and I hear this from quite a few, is the increase in their employee satisfaction, for the simple reason that the technology has lifted almost all of the mundane administration from them, and they are focusing on doing the piece of the job that they enjoy the most, which is negotiating and doing deals with brokers.
It's quite interesting because I've been speaking to a few quite young underwriters who've come into the market who now want to get involved in intertech activities. You say, why are you so interested in tech, or why are you so interested in venture or whatever? And they say, because underwriting's so boring. And my assessment of that is that they're under 30. Most of their day is spent in those mundane tasks, and it is quite boring. And actually, if you think about it, some of those, or a lot of those tasks are under threat. There's a strap line in those about making underwriting less boring as a sort of sales tag. I'll charge you for that later.
The phrase that we've used is, we are trying to bring the joy back to underwriting. I'll charge you for that one later.
You're accentuating the positive, and I'm much better in the negative. So my next thought is, you're in quite crowded space. I mean, not the only one. We'll come back to verticalised end-to-end solutions in a minute, but there's no shortage of people offering what you offer in different flavours and different forms. What do you attribute your success to?
There's a lot of talk about agentic, non-agentic, or AI. I actually don't believe that we are in a crowded space. I think that everyone's talking about agentic AI, or whatever the latest buzzword is. But I honestly think that the tech industry has got it wrong. I spoke to Andrew Johnson from Gallagher Re last week, who told me that in Q3, 75% or greater than 75% of all insurtech investments wore the badge of AI or agentic AI. So that's not really a differentiator. And while I see the tech companies getting really excited about these solutions, I've yet to meet an underwriter or a CEO who has said actually part of their objectives were tied to using agentic or other AI. In fact, they're tied to business outcomes. So I think that, and Robin, you and I discussed it about blockchain. I think that, and how many times are we going to make the same mistake as tech providers? AI is an input to the business process. in terms of what it might do. The output might be a reduction in the time taken, for example, to get from submission to quote. But it's the outcome that's important, because we can write a risk in half the time, which is great, but we then need to use that free time to either grow the book by 100% or improve the loss ratios or reduce administrative expenses. So I think our differentiation as a company is the combination of insurance expertise and that focus on those customer outcomes. And I'm not worried about the input, whether it might be agentic or non-agentic. It's about what's our customer business trying to achieve. Are they trying to grow market share or whichever doing? And just deploying the technology focused on that outcome rather than arguing whether my agentic AI is better than someone else's agentic AI. It's about running their business, not running our business.
Tech as problem solver, or tech and expertise as underwriting problem solvers. Another area where I see you're slightly different is this fully verticalized solution, starting right at the beginning of the risk and going all the way through to post-administration. And I think you're relatively unique in that. And then I think the reason for that is a lot of people would say people want modular solutions. It's quite difficult to sell a solution that starts right at the beginning and goes all the way through to the end, because people already have existing tech that you need to work around and so on. Are you finding that the verticalized bit doesn't put people off? They've got to take the whole thing to replace whatever they had.
So there's perhaps two questions wrapped up here. So one is the modularity of the platform. So the system is end to end. It clearly interoperates, but it can interoperate with our capabilities or anybody else's. So in terms of the modules, you could take each or any of the modules. You could actually embed it not at a modular level, at a function level if you want to. So that's not an issue. So we're not forcing anybody to have to do a wholesale platform swap. In terms of the verticalization, it's interesting. It's an evolved answer rather than anything else. So if I'd have gone to the Silicon Valley and said, I'd like to raise $100 million to transform the specialty market, they would say, okay, create me a solution which is generic, it can work across every line. And we've seen that time and time happen in the market. It intuitively works at an investor presentation level, because 90% of insurance is identical from class to class. It's a policy, you have a premium, you might have claims, etc. But actually the specialty market is defined by its nuances. And political violence and terror is 1,000,000 miles away from aviation, which is 1,000,000 miles away from surety, for example. And so it's those nuances that make the really big difference. By chance, more than design, we've done this the hard way, in that we had a solution which had to be super detailed on marine. We had to be able to ingest, for example, 100% of the data, all of the vessel data, and make that really work really well in marine. And then because we'd done it in marine, we then had to do the same in aviation. And then once we'd done that in political violence, we had to be able to take massive multi-thousand line SOVs and process those and understand the marginal impact of aggregations, do that in real time. So from client to client, we've built out these very sophisticated solutions. And in practice, what it means is that when we walk through the door of a prospective client, the reaction we get more than anything else is they point at the screen and go, that's exactly what I need. I'm not sure we would have done it as a deliberate strategy, but that's where we've ended up. And by chance, by luck, by judgment, whichever, it's actually put us in quite a strong position.
So what I take from that, I think it's a bit of a trend, is that the business user is having more and more of an influence on technology selection and decisioning. In other words, what you and I used to is some CTO arm in arm with some consulting go off and select the technology and then impose it top down on the underwriter. What you're just telling me there is that it's the underwriter who sees this and goes, I love this. And then he goes and makes the case to the powers that be in his organization. Is that right?
That's pretty much it. So clearly, most of our deals are multi-line deals. So we tend to find that one or another of the underwriters finds their way to us, or we find our way to them. And then we get to the CUO and the COO, and they can see that actually this has multi-line applicability. That works really well. That decision-making seems to be delegated now a little bit further out to the edges of the organization.
Okay, let's look ahead. What does 2026 look like for Concirrus? Where do you see the best opportunities for you?
So the big market trend that I see is about delegated authority. The rise of the MGA, which is just astonishing. I think year over year premium I read recently from the end of 24, it increased 15% to the best part of $100 billion. It's the fourth consecutive year of double-digit increases. It's expected that will continue. And what I see with these MGAs is that they're compressing the market. They're engaging with brokers differently, sometimes having a direct solution or a portal or whichever. And candidly, they are much quicker and outperforming the carriers in their ability to deploy their P&L, so make decisions and get them out there. And again, if you look at the capital providers or the venture providers for those startups, they're looking at these technology-fueled MGAs as a differentiator. I wrote an article about them being the R&D lab of the insurance market. So we are seeing that these sorts of businesses are different. Not to say that the tier one carriers aren't responding, but they're fundamentally slower just in their sales cycle. But a sales cycle which might take weeks with an MGA will take us months with a tier one carrier. They've got other factors to consider. But these new businesses are more than just deploy capacity. In my view, they represent the next generation of what I would call risk entrepreneurs. They're running the business fundamentally differently to how they've been run before. And these are people who are not afraid to start doing things. We see a lot that are older than 45 who are saying, actually, why don't I take my career's worth of expertise and also get a stake in the business as well? So I think it's at both ends of the market. So I think that sea change is driving a new wave of shopping, shall we say, for core platforms in the market. Yeah, because it's an arms race at the end of the day.
On top of your tech advantage, there's a lot of capital available to deploy for MGAs, and the market, all aspects of the market are aligned to make it easy for you to set one up these days. Yeah, the age of the MGA.
There are businesses out there whose business is to set up MGAs, and they're using their capital, they're attracting some really entrepreneurial talent to those businesses. They're helping fund them. They're pushing them into the market. It's a really attractive proposition, I think, to do that. We live in an age where entrepreneurship is somewhat celebrated. So why not?
So let's talk about your business a bit more. And I'm looking now internally rather than the technology you sell. And you said to me earlier, that you went away, you rebuilt your technology on a new platform with AI at the heart of it all. How does that change your business? You said you can shave development and deployment times, but what does your workforce now look like? How does it change how Concirrus itself works?
As I said, it's an interesting change. For me, as a function of age, candidly, Robin, speaking as two young men, we've lived through the advent of various technologies, the internet. We won't go back too far, we'll embarrass ourselves, but the internet, mobile phones, etc. And now AI. And what I've seen is that if you want something to be a competitive advantage, you need to put it right at the heart of your business and almost make your business entirely dependent on it. So we took that decision with some of these tools with AI. What it meant, however, was that we had to ask our employees to change the way that they worked. And that was a harder lesson than I expected it to be. Because if you go to somebody and say, here, I have a tool that allows you to do your work in half the time, you need to be very clear on what you want them to do with that freed up time. Because if they don't do anything, then all you've effectively done is increase your cost base by introducing this tooling. If I go into our product teams, for example, it's, okay, now you can write up specifications in half the time. I'd like you to spend the other half of your time in the market, understand our customers' business, go to events, etc., and really start to generate that value add. I've got kids I used to say, can you go to your bedroom and tidy it up, please? And they would sit there and go, I'm not quite sure what you want me to do. So much like I go to our teams, I'd like you to be more productive. They're like, what does that mean? So we had to think really hard, and it's been trial and error to understand what is it that we're asking people to do more of, and how should they think about it. And sometimes we got it right, sometimes we got it wrong.
Presumably what you're seeing at Concirrus, in the sense of having to educate a workforce, meld agents or AI with your human workforce. By the way, at our recent Agentic AI event, somebody had a slide in which they referred to AI agents and biological agents. Not humans anymore. We're biological. In this day and age, we're biological agents. I hold that thought.
We should just have numbers instead of names, yeah.
Only a consultant. But so what you've experienced is presumably something that your customers, certainly armed with your technology, are experiencing or will experience too. Has that changed anything?
Yes, I think having that empathy with the change ourselves helps us with our customers. Again, if you take any process, we mentioned earlier submissions, let's stay with that. If you're suddenly looking at it and going, the submissions process, rather than taking a day, it takes 90 seconds and it's freed up people's time, then what are they going to do with their time? And we've seen some challenges that we've been talking to our customers about, which is how do you bring people up to speed? For example, the traditional path into underwriting was you became an underwriting assistant and you maybe sat in the box next to somebody at Lloyd's or whichever, but you processed documents and then you said, what should I put in here? And then someone would tell you. Of course, that entire entry path to underwriting has now almost vaporized almost overnight. So again, now we're thinking, how do you get people up to speed? So we've sat with our customers and we've shared with them how we're getting people up to speed and to talk to them about equivalence within the underwriting sphere and within that domain. So it is really fascinating. And it's a generalized problem, which is how are we going to interact with the technology and what does that mean? At the end of the day, the implementation of AI is a massive human capital change project, biological or otherwise. It's a massive people change project. And I think whilst the vendors are getting really giddy with excitement about all the things it could do, it's about change. And you can have the best technology in the world. If the change is not managed well, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah, my other observation is that we talked about increased levels of business user engagement and how the businesses are much more. That's true, but it's just true of certain select people. There's champions who believe in this stuff. It's not yet a cultural shift organizationally such that change is then easy to manage. It's just a few people who are very taken with the tech. The majority of both organizations still need to be taken on that process, and it's a huge investment in time and cost.
They do need to go on that journey, but remember there's a disparity between people's professional and personal lives. People are incredibly comfortable in using technology and AI in their personal lives, whether it be you talking to Alexa at home or searching for a photograph of wine on your phone or using Google Maps or whichever. We use those effortlessly. And that same person then comes into the office and is met with a green screen. That doesn't work. So I think that people have got more confidence and capability than we might give them credit for. The issue is the fear of getting it wrong. And the thing that I've learned from doing this internally, the real power in this, it comes through rapid iteration, is don't worry about getting it wrong, worry about not starting, because you'll learn what works for you. And I think that people will adapt. There are going to be people who will be casualties of this. But for most people, I think it unlocks potential, like latent potential and capacity which exists in the organisation.
Found stuff as ever. And talking of which, we always give people a chance to sign off with one inspiring thought to leave with our audience. Would you like to take that opportunity?
Sure. So I'm not one for grand statements, but I've been thinking.
I don't. Steady. I'm not. Go on. I'll let you get away with that.
What I meant was I'm not one for picking up the bill when we go out for dinner, Robin. It's when to think about it. I think that we are in an absolute golden age for technology and for insurance. The technology constraints that defined how the business processes have worked have effectively disappeared from the market. You may not realize that, people may not realize it, but they have disappeared. AI it's a talent multiplier. You can do things that you would never have imagined that you could get done in a short period of time or as a cost. So this, as I say, it's a golden age of human talent and creativity. And I think that we collectively are about to unleash what I'm titling the next wave of risk entrepreneurs into the world. And I'm really excited about the insurance products that they will imagine, how they will reimagine the markets working. And we're going to see companies pop out from nowhere and get multi-$100 million in a couple of years from their inception. I don't want to oversell it, but it's a golden age. It absolutely is. So I don't worry about the downside. I look forward to the upside.
I think you've just given us the title to this podcast, The Golden Age. I'm going to claim it as a world exclusive. Andy Yeoman, a man not given to grandiloquent statements, finishing off with a grandiloquent statement on yet another brilliant Instech podcast. Andy, thank you for being a good friend of ours, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for having me.
Well, if you've made it this far, then I'm pretty sure you found that as interesting as I did. The Instech podcast comes out every Sunday morning, where we spotlight the latest news, leading voices, and freshest updates across insurance that you need to know about. If you would like to take part in these conversations, head to www.instech.co to find out how you can join our network and be a part of the insurance intelligence for the curious.